Sometimes the words of a child can cut deeper than 1,000 storms, shaking the heart of a man who thought he had everything, yet realizing he had nothing at all. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the rest of this journey. Snow fell hard over Chicago that night, blanketing Michigan Avenue in a thick white silence. The street lamps along the Magnificent Mile flickered like distant lanterns, casting pale halos across the sidewalks. Cars slid cautiously on icy roads, their headlights dissolving into the swirling snowflakes. To most, it was just another winter evening. To Alexander Reed, it was the night his life would split in two, before and after. Alexander stood on the 39th floor of Trump Tower, staring down at the city through floor-to-ceiling glass. His penthouse office was warm, trimmed with dark oak, polished steel, and a fireplace that never truly warmed him. At 42, he had everything the world told him mattered: skyscrapers that bore his name, newspapers praising his billion-dollar real estate empire, investors bowing to his vision. Yet for all his success, there was a hollowness in him, an echo that money could not quiet. He pressed his palm against the glass. Below, Michigan Avenue was alive with Christmas lights strung between buildings, shoppers hunched in coats, taxis darting like yellow sparks. It was supposed to feel magical. Instead, it felt distant, empty. With a restless sigh, he grabbed his scarf and stepped out. His driver offered to bring the car around, but Alexander waved him off. He needed to walk. The cold hit like a wall when he exited the tower. Snowflakes stung his cheeks, and his shoes crunched against ice. Michigan Avenue spread before him, a glittering boulevard lined with boutiques and holiday windows. Yet beneath the beauty, Alexander felt the city's hidden edges, the shiver of the homeless, the hush of the forgotten. He almost missed her. At first glance, she was just another bundle of rags on a bench near Tribune Tower. But then he heard it. A whisper, fragile as wind through broken glass. "Everyone has a home, except me." Alexander froze. The voice belonged to a little girl, no more than 7. She sat curled against the stone wall, arms wrapped around a worn teddy bear missing one eye. Her blonde hair stuck out from under a wool hat too big for her, and her thin coat was buttoned wrong. Snow had gathered on her shoulders like she had been sitting there for hours. For a moment, Alexander thought he was imagining her words, but then she lifted her head, blue eyes wide and hollow, and repeated, "I just want a place to sleep without hearing doors slam." The street noises blurred into nothing. Alexander felt something pierce through the armor he had worn for years. He could not remember the last time someone's words had struck him so nakedly. Perhaps never. He stepped closer. "Hey, are you alone out here?" The girl clutched her teddy tighter, wary. "I'm Lily. My mom's gone. I stay with Miss Ruby sometimes, but she's tired. Real tired." Alexander's throat tightened. Gone. That word carried the weight of too many graves. He crouched, his expensive overcoat dusting the snow. "How long have you been out here, Lily?" She shrugged, as if time no longer mattered. "Since the doors closed." "I didn't want to wake Miss Ruby. She gets mad if she hears banging." Her voice was soft, but there was a steadiness in it that cut deeper than tears. A businessman brushed past, muttering under his breath about beggars. Another couple averted their eyes, walking quickly as if kindness was too costly. But Alexander couldn't move. He couldn't just walk away. He noticed Lily's fingers trembling, the knuckles red from cold. Without thinking, he slipped off his leather gloves and offered them. "Here, take these." She hesitated, then slid them on. They hung loose on her small hands, but her expression softened. "They're warm." Alexander swallowed. Do you have somewhere safe tonight? She shook her head, eyes dropping to the ground. Safe is not real. The words sliced him open. Safe is not real. He had built towers of steel and glass, promised luxury to thousands of tenants, yet here was a child who didn't even believe in safety. For the first time in years, Alexander felt powerless. He extended his hand, uncertain if she would take it. Lily, would you let me walk you home? Her eyes narrowed, cautious. You're not a bad man, are you? The question nearly undid him. For decades, boardrooms had whispered about Alexander Reed, ruthless, calculated, brilliant. A man who crushed rivals with contracts, who signed away futures with a flick of his pen. Now, here he was, kneeling in the snow, being weighed by the innocence of a child. I don't want to be, he said honestly. Something in his voice must have convinced her. She stood, clutching her teddy, and slipped her tiny hand into his. They walked together down Michigan Avenue, past glowing shop windows and rushing strangers. To the world, they looked like a mismatched pair. A billionaire in a tailored coat and a ragged little girl in gloves too big. But to Alexander, each step felt like stepping out of a life he no longer wanted, and into one he had never known he needed. Snow crunched beneath their feet. Lily's breath came out in small clouds, and she hummed softly, as if to comfort herself. What are you humming? Alexander asked. It's a song Mom used to sing, she said. She said, stars listen when you're lonely. Alexander glanced up. The city lights drowned most of the stars, but he knew they were there. Listening. And for the first time in decades, Alexander Reed, the man who owned towers, who commanded millions, felt the ache of something greater than himself. Not ambition, not wealth, but the fragile, stubborn hope carried in the voice of a little girl who only wanted a place to belong. That night, the snow kept falling, soft and endless, covering the city in white. But for Alexander, everything had already changed. The walk across Chicago felt longer than Alexander had expected. The glitter of Michigan Avenue faded into darker streets, where neon signs buzzed over shuttered stores and broken street lamps left pockets of shadow. Snow piled up along sidewalks, dirty at the edges where buses had sprayed slush. Lily's small hand stayed wrapped inside his gloved one, her teddy bear tucked under her arm. She walked with the weariness of someone twice her age. Are we close? Alexander asked. She nodded. Miss Ruby's place. Just a basement. But she lets me sleep there when it's too cold outside. The words basement and too cold outside landed like weights on his chest. In his penthouse, there were 3 fireplaces, though he never sat beside them. For her, warmth was conditional, borrowed. They crossed into the west side, where brick buildings slumped with age and graffiti-colored garage doors. The city's glamour gave way to the quiet of neighborhoods too often forgotten. Lily pointed to a sagging row house with cracked steps. That one. Alexander hesitated. The windows were dark, except for a dim bulb glowing through a basement window half buried in snow. He followed Lily around to a side door, paint peeling, hinges rusted. She knocked twice in a pattern. Rap, pause, rap, rap. The door creaked open. A frail woman stood in the frame, wrapped in a threadbare shawl. Her skin was parchment thin, hair streaked gray, eyes sharp even in exhaustion. Lily, she said, voice raspy. Then her gaze slid past the child to Alexander, tall in his black coat, a stranger at her door. And who's this? This is Mr. A., Lily said quickly. He helped me. The woman narrowed her eyes. Helped, huh? She studied Alexander like a jeweler inspecting glass for cracks. You look like the kind that never comes this far west unless you're lost. Or guilty. Alexander dipped his head slightly. My name is Alexander Reed. I saw Lily outside tonight. She shouldn't have been in that cold. The woman stepped aside reluctantly, letting them in. The basement smelled faintly of kerosene and damp brick. A single space heater buzzed in the corner. A mattress lay against one wall, a chipped table stood in the center, and coats hung on nails like makeshift insulation. I'm Ruby, she said finally, settling onto a chair. She waved toward Lily. Her mother, God rest her soul, was a friend of mine. After the accident, I tried to keep Lily out of the system. Didn't want her lost to foster homes. But I'm 70. Lungs not worth much anymore. She coughed into a handkerchief, then looked back at Alexander with clear defiance. And don't think for a minute that money solves what she needs. Alexander met her gaze evenly. What she needs is not to freeze in the streets. Ruby's lips twitched, as if he'd missed the point. You got towers named after you, don't you? Men like you build condos where the rich look down on streets like mine. You sell safety and call it home. But home is not a contract, Mr. Reed. It's the sound of someone's voice when the nightmares come. Her words stung more than he expected. She wasn't wrong. Lily had slipped out of her coat and was rummaging in a little box near the mattress. She pulled out a crayon drawing and held it up proudly to Alexander. This is my mom. And this is me. And this one's you. He blinked. In the corner of the page, a tall figure stood beside the small child, both smiling under a crooked roof. He had never seen himself through a child's eyes before, drawn in bright colors, not headlines. Ruby watched him quietly. She's been drawing you since the first night she met you. Did you know that? Children cling fast. You ready to carry that? Alexander didn't answer right away. He traced the little house Lily had drawn, simple and lopsided but filled with warmth. His throat tightened. I don't know what I'm ready for, he admitted softly. Ruby leaned back, sighing. Honesty? That's more than most men give. Still, don't you go making promises if you're gonna walk away. She's lost enough. The basement grew quiet. The only sound the hum of the space heater and Lily humming her star song again. Alexander finally said, May I come back? Bring food? Maybe help fix the leaks here? Ruby studied him again, as though measuring whether he was built for more than glass towers and signed checks. At last, she nodded slightly. You can come, but remember, this child doesn't need a hero. She needs someone who doesn't disappear. The warning sat heavy on Alexander's chest. He thought of his office high above Michigan Avenue, the silence of his penthouse, the empty echo of success. He looked at Lily, curled up on the mattress, whispering to her teddy bear, and felt the ground of his life shift beneath him. Ruby coughed again, pressing a hand to her chest. One day I won't be here to keep the lights on in this little hole. When that day comes, what happens to her then? The question hung in the air. Alexander had no answer yet, but in the deepest corner of his heart, something began to form. Not an answer, but a vow. That night, he walked back through the snow, the city colder than ever, yet inside him a flicker of warmth burned. For the first time, he wasn't sure if he belonged more in his glass tower or in a basement lit by a failing space heater and guarded by the fierce love of an old woman. And for the first time in years, Alexander Reed wanted to be chosen. Not by investors, not by headlines, but by the quiet trust of a little girl who had drawn him into her dream of home. The next morning, Alexander stood in the gleaming kitchen of his penthouse, staring at the untouched breakfast laid out by his staff. Croissants, berries, espresso steaming in a porcelain cup. It looked perfect, curated, lifeless. His appetite was gone. All he could see was Lily's small hand in his glove the night before, and the sketch she had given him. Crayon lines of a crooked house where he stood smiling next to her. He had stared at that drawing until dawn, the paper soft beneath his fingers. It had unsettled him more than any deal, more than any boardroom ambush. By 9 o'clock, his assistant was already texting him reminders about investor meetings. Alexander typed back only 2 words: cancel all. Instead, he stopped at a grocery store on his way to the west side. The clerk gave him a second look when he loaded cans of soup, fresh fruit, and blankets into his basket. He wasn't sure why the act felt so foreign. For decades he had bought contracts, not carrots. When he arrived at Ruby's basement, Lily opened the door with a squeal. "Mr. A!" She tugged him inside, her teddy bear still under one arm. "Look, I made something." The basement smelled of damp brick again, but this time, sunlight slanted through the window, dust motes glowing like fireflies. Lily had strung a line of paper stars across the ceiling, cut clumsily from notebook pages, colored with crayons, taped together in a crooked constellation. "They're for when the real stars don't come out," she explained proudly. "Now it's never dark." Alexander tilted his head back, staring at the fragile chain of stars. His throat thickened. "They're beautiful, Lily." Ruby emerged from the back room, leaning on a cane. She coughed but managed a wry smile. "She's been working on those all week. Said she wanted to give you the sky." Lily tugged his sleeve. "And I made a book. Come see." She pulled out a notebook with frayed edges. Each page held a drawing. Houses of all shapes, with gardens, dogs, and stick figures. And in nearly every one, there he was, the tall man beside her. "This is our dream house," she explained, pointing to a page where a crooked roof covered them both. "And this one has a swing set, and this one has stars painted on the ceiling." Alexander's chest tightened. He had never thought of himself as belonging in someone's dream. Ruby sat at the table, eyes sharp despite her frailty. "You see what I meant? She's attaching herself to you already. That's not crayons and paper, Mr. Reed. That's trust. And trust is heavier than money." He sat across from her, still holding the notebook. "I don't want to break that trust." Ruby's gaze softened slightly. "Then don't. But understand what it means. Children don't care about your skyscrapers. They care about who shows up. Who stays when the fever hits at midnight? Who listens when they whisper about nightmares?" Alexander nodded slowly. He thought of his father, who had vanished when he was 9, leaving only debts and unanswered questions. His own childhood had been a series of slammed doors and empty tables. He had vowed never to need anyone again. And yet, here he was, needed more than ever. Lily climbed onto his lap, flipping to another page. "This one's my favorite. It's you and me and Miss Ruby, and no one else." Her words were simple, but they pressed against the hollow place inside him like a balm. "Lily," he said carefully, "what do you want most?" She thought for a long time. Then she whispered, "A place where doors don't slam." Alexander swallowed hard. That sentence would follow him forever. He looked at Ruby. Her cough racked her body again, and he saw the effort it took for her to catch her breath. She noticed his glance and waved it off. "Don't look at me like I'm a tragedy. I've had a good run, but she—" Ruby's eyes flicked toward Lily. "She deserves more than a basement." Silence fell. Alexander felt the weight of 2 lives pressing against him, one fragile, fading, the other blooming, reaching. At last he spoke. "Then I'll come back tomorrow, and the next day. And the day after that, if you'll allow me." Ruby studied him, her expression unreadable. Then she gave a single nod. "We'll see if you mean it." That evening, when Alexander returned to his tower, he carried Lily's notebook in his briefcase. He canceled another round of meetings, ignoring the storm of emails from his board. For once, their impatience didn't matter. He sat at his glass desk, opened the notebook again, and traced the lopsided stars and houses. Paper stars, taped together with hope. He realized that in all his towers of steel and glass, he had never built a home. And for the first time in years, Alexander Reed didn't feel like the richest man in Chicago. He felt like a man being given a chance to be more than his fortune, to be written into the dreams of a little girl who believed the stars listened when you were lonely. Snow had started to melt in patches when Alexander returned to the West Side a week later, his car idling on the curb while he carried 2 bags inside. The basement door groaned open, and the same wave of damp air greeted him. Inside, Lily was cutting out more stars from a stack of notebook paper, her little scissors snipping rhythmically. "Mr. A!" she squealed, rushing to him. "I made more stars. This one glows if you put it by the heater." She held up a piece of paper rubbed with the wax of an old crayon, proud of its fragile brilliance. Ruby sat at the table, her shawl wrapped tight. She coughed into her handkerchief, and the sound lingered longer this time. Her face had thinned in only a week. Alexander set the bags on the table, fresh produce, medicine, a small electric heater. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Ruby waved him off. "Don't waste your breath on me, worry about her." But Alexander couldn't ignore the tremor in her hands. He had read too many medical files in his life, signed too many contracts for hospitals and clinics. He knew the look of failing health. Later that afternoon, while Lily napped on the mattress, Alexander sat across from Ruby. "I want to move you both somewhere safer, near Lincoln Park. There's a building I own, quieter, secure. Lily could go to a better school. You could have heat that doesn't depend on a sputtering space heater." Ruby narrowed her eyes. "You think you can just scoop us up like lost coins and drop us in one of your towers?" "It isn't charity," Alexander said firmly. "It's care. You've given her more than anyone else since her mother died. But I can see your strength is slipping." "You shouldn't carry this alone." Ruby exhaled slowly, as if weighing the truth she already knew. "I'm not blind. My lungs fight me every morning. But she's not mine to give away like an old chair. She's a child, Alexander. She needs roots, not relocation." Before he could respond, Lily stirred awake, rubbing her eyes. She padded over, clutching her teddy, and sat beside Ruby. "Mr. A says we can live near the zoo, with real windows." Ruby looked down at her. "And what do you say, child?" Lily's face was solemn, far too solemn for 7 years. "I'll go, if you say yes." Ruby's lips trembled. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she placed a wrinkled hand on Lily's hair. "I've kept you as long as I could. But love doesn't mean holding tighter when you're slipping. Love means letting you rest where it's safe." Lily's eyes filled with tears. She hugged Ruby tightly. "I won't leave if you don't want me to." Ruby's hand shook as she stroked the girl's back. Finally, she looked up at Alexander. "Take her, but don't you dare vanish when it gets hard. You hear me? Don't be another slammed door in her life." The words sank deep. Alexander nodded once. "I won't." That night, he brought them both to an apartment overlooking Lincoln Park Zoo. It was modest compared to his penthouse, but to Lily, it might as well have been a castle. She ran from room to room, her laughter echoing. "Look, Mr. A, there's a window just for me, and I can see the trees." She twirled in circles, her paper stars clutched in her hand. Ruby sat heavily on the couch, her breath short, but her eyes softened as she watched Lily dance. "This is what she deserves," she whispered. "Not basements, not shadows." Alexander stood by the window, watching the girl's reflection dart across the glass. In that moment, something shifted inside him. He had spent his life acquiring square footage, calculating cost per unit, maximizing return. But this, watching a child discover joy in the simple miracle of a window, this was priceless. Later, when Lily finally collapsed into bed, she arranged her paper stars on the headboard. She looked up at Alexander, who stood awkwardly in the doorway. "Will you stay here tonight?" she asked softly. He hesitated. He had never been asked that by anyone, not since childhood. Business meetings, parties, transactions, yes. But to simply stay? He walked in, sat at the edge of the bed, and nodded. "Yes, Lily, I'll stay." Her eyes closed with a small smile, as though the promise alone was enough to carry her into dreams. Alexander remained there long after she fell asleep, listening to her steady breathing. For the first time in decades, he felt like he belonged exactly where he was. Not in a skyscraper boardroom, not in the society pages, but in a quiet apartment beside a child who had built paper stars to keep the dark away. And as snow fell again outside, Alexander Reed, the man who once believed his name was etched in glass and steel, realized that perhaps his true legacy would not be measured in towers, but in the light of one small girl's laughter filling a home by Lincoln Park. The first week in the Lincoln Park apartment turned Alexander's world upside down. For years, his life had been governed by boardroom calendars, late-night phone calls with investors in Tokyo, and headlines that measured his worth in stock prices. Now his mornings began with Lily shaking his arm and whispering, "Mr. A, you promised to walk me to school." He wasn't used to promises that couldn't be rescheduled. Francis W. Parker School sat just a few blocks away. The first morning, Alexander found himself standing in a hallway lined with children's drawings, waiting for Lily to hang her coat. He wore a tailored suit as usual, but here it felt like armor in the wrong battlefield. Parents chatted casually about homework, bake sales, and field trips. Alexander stood silent, more nervous than in any negotiation with billion-dollar stakes. When Lily finally turned, she beamed. "See you after school, Mr. A." Her voice rang with a confidence that startled him. She trusted he would return. He swallowed the lump in his throat and nodded. "I'll be here." Back in his office that afternoon, his assistant brought in quarterly reports. "Investors want you on the 2 o'clock call, sir." Alexander glanced at the clock. 2 o'clock meant he would miss Lily's dismissal at 3. He thought of her standing on the sidewalk, searching for him, the trust in her voice that morning. He closed the report. "Cancel the call." His assistant blinked. "Sir, that's Tokyo. We've been negotiating this deal for months. I said cancel." It was the first time in years he had chosen something outside the empire he built. The weight of that choice felt terrifying and liberating at once. That evening, Lily had a fever. Her cheeks flushed, her forehead hot to the touch. Ruby had insisted on staying, but the old woman's cough left her too weak to do more than sit beside the bed. Alexander paced the apartment, checking the thermometer every 5 minutes as if numbers could give him control. He had never been good at helplessness. Deals, he could crush. Markets, he could manipulate. But a child's fever? That left him undone. When Lily whimpered, he sat beside her, dabbing her forehead with a damp cloth. "It's all right, Lily. I'm here." Her small hand reached for his. "Don't leave, Mr. A." "I won't," he whispered. And for the first time in decades, he meant it with every fiber of his being. The days tumbled into a new rhythm. Alexander, the man who once dined at Michelin-starred restaurants, now burned pancakes on a Sunday morning while Lily giggled at the smoke. He who once negotiated in skyscrapers now crouched on the floor. Helping her solve math problems, she scribbled with colored pencils. Ruby, watching from her chair, shook her head. Never thought I'd see the day Alexander Reed tried to flip a grilled cheese sandwich. I'm improving, Alexander muttered, scraping off a charred edge. Lily laughed, holding up her teddy bear. Even Teddy thinks you need practice. He found himself smiling more often. Awkward, unpolished smiles that reached his eyes. But the outside world noticed his absence. Board members began to whisper. Reporters questioned his sudden retreat from public life. His assistant confronted him one morning. You've missed 3 board meetings, sir. Investors are unsettled. They want reassurance. Alexander looked out the window at the snow melting into Lincoln Park, children tossing snowballs where he would soon walk with Lily. Tell them I'll speak at the end of the month. And until then? He turned back steady. Until then, they'll learn the company can stand without me. The assistant frowned, but left. Alexander sank into his chair, feeling the tug of war inside him. He was no longer the man who could vanish into the safety of numbers. He was now tethered to a child who called him Mr. A, to a fragile old woman who demanded he not disappear. That evening, Lily sat at the kitchen table, drawing again. She slid a page toward him. This time it wasn't a crooked house. It was him, standing with a briefcase in one hand and her hand in the other. Above them, paper stars hung from the sky. You're in all my pictures now, she said simply. He stared at the page, heart pounding. Somewhere deep, the man who once measured himself in wealth realized he was being measured in crayons and trust. And for the first time, he preferred it. One night, as Ruby tucked Lily into bed, she whispered to Alexander, You're changing, you know. She's rearranged your life piece by piece. Alexander didn't argue. He knew it was true. His penthouse tower still loomed over Michigan Avenue, but he no longer lived by its cold silence. His days were rearranged by school bells, crayons, and fevers. His nights by whispered promises never to leave. And as he stood at the apartment window, watching Lily's paper stars sway gently in the heat from the radiator, Alexander Reed understood something he had never let himself believe. Life could be rebuilt. Not with steel and glass, but with trust, laughter, and the fragile, stubborn light of a child who refused to let the dark win. Spring crept slowly into Chicago. Snow along the sidewalks melted into gray puddles, the trees around Lincoln Park showing the first signs of green. For Lily, the new season meant afternoons at the park, running with other children, her laughter carrying across the playground. For Alexander, it meant something else, a life that felt strangely fuller, yet more fragile. Every evening, he found himself waiting outside Francis W. Parker School, leaning against his car, briefcase in hand. Each time Lily spotted him, she ran into his arms as if there were no doubt in the world he would be there. Each time, he felt the same unfamiliar warmth, belonging. But belonging is never without cost. It began one Friday evening, as Alexander walked Lily home from school. She chattered about spelling words and a science project involving seeds. They turned onto their street, the sun sinking low over Lincoln Park Zoo. That's when Alexander noticed him. A man leaning against the fence, cigarette glowing faintly. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a shadow of unshaven stubble. His eyes locked on Lily, not with curiosity, but with something sharper, possessive. The man straightened as they approached. Lily, he drawled. Lily froze, clutching Alexander's hand so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her teddy bear slipped from her arm and landed in the grass. She didn't move to pick it up. Alexander looked between them. "You know him?" Her lips trembled. "That's my dad." The man smirked, eyes shifting to Alexander. "Name's Mark Thompson, her father. Not that anyone bothered to tell me where she was until now." Alexander's chest tightened. Mark. The father. The man who had vanished, leaving Lily in the care of an overworked mother and then, by fate, in Ruby's arms. "What do you want?" Alexander asked evenly. Mark took a drag on his cigarette, exhaling smoke. "What do you think? She's my daughter. And last I checked, blood means something in this city. You can't just play house with someone else's kid." Lily pressed closer to Alexander, whispering, "Please don't let him take me." Alexander crouched to meet her eyes. "I'm right here. I won't let anything happen." When he straightened, his expression was steel. "Lily has a home now, with people who actually show up. Where were you when her mother died? When she needed warmth in the dead of winter?" Mark's jaw tightened. "I was serving time. Mistakes, yeah. But I'm out now, and I've got rights. Courts see it my way sooner or later. You're just a rich man trying to polish your image by stealing someone else's child." The accusation hit like a slap. Alexander had faced plenty of critics in his life, journalists, rivals, politicians, but none of them had cut like this, being accused of playing savior with a little girl's heart. "Being a father isn't a performance," Alexander said coldly. "It's staying. It's holding her hand when she's sick, packing her lunch, listening when she whispers about nightmares. Do you even know what her favorite color is?" Mark flinched, but quickly recovered with a sneer. "Courts don't care about colors. They care about bloodlines, and mine's stronger than your wallet." Before Alexander could respond, Ruby appeared at the gate, her cane tapping against the sidewalk. Her eyes were sharp as knives despite her frail body. "You have some nerve, Mark Thompson," she rasped. "You left that child to starve while you rotted in a cell. You don't get to waltz back in and claim her like a piece of furniture." Mark's face darkened. "Stay out of this, old woman. You're not family." Ruby lifted her chin. "Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shares your burdens. And you never carried hers." Alexander stepped forward, standing between Mark and Lily. "If you want to fight, we'll do it in court. But understand this." He looked straight into Mark's eyes, voice unshakable. "Fatherhood isn't measured by DNA. It's measured by the nights you don't walk away." Mark's mouth twisted, but he said nothing. He flicked his cigarette onto the sidewalk, ground it under his boot, and walked off into the dusk. Lily was trembling. Alexander bent down, scooping her teddy from the grass. He brushed it off and pressed it back into her arms. "You're safe, Lily. I promise." She looked up at him with wide, fearful eyes. "He can't take me, can he?" He swallowed hard, pulling her close. "Not while I'm here. And I'll always be here." That night, after Lily finally fell asleep, Ruby sat with Alexander in the kitchen. The old woman's face was pale, her cough deeper, but her voice was steady. "He'll come back. Men like him never give up easy when pride's on the line." Alexander rubbed his temples. "Then I'll fight, whatever it takes." Ruby studied him with quiet intensity. "Do you understand what that means? Custody battles aren't boardroom games. It's lawyers, judges, social workers digging into your life." "Every crack will be pried open. And if he plays dirty—" "I don't care," Alexander interrupted. "She's worth every battle." Ruby's lips curved faintly, the closest thing to approval he had ever seen from her. "Then hold fast, because that child will cling to you the way a drowning soul clings to driftwood. Don't let go no matter how rough the waters get." Alexander sat back, staring at the dark window where the city lights flickered. He had fought countless battles, built empires brick by brick, but none of it frightened him like this. The thought of losing Lily. For the first time, he realized the stakes weren't profit margins or skyscrapers. The stakes were a 7-year-old girl who had whispered in the snow, "Everyone has a home, except me." And he vowed that night, with a clarity sharper than any contract, she would never whisper those words again. Chicago's evenings grew longer as spring tipped into summer. The air was warmer now, but Alexander often caught Lily shivering when she walked home, not from the cold, but from the shadow of fear that followed her ever since Mark's return. She rarely said his name. When she did, her small voice sank almost to a whisper. "Is he out there, Mr. A?" And Alexander always answered the same way. "You're safe. I won't let him touch you." But safety no longer felt like a promise. It felt like a battle. The first threat came quietly. One evening, as Alexander tucked Lily into bed, he noticed a folded paper slid under the apartment door. No address, no signature, just a photograph. Lily, snapped from a distance as she played on the swings near Lincoln Park. Across the bottom, in block letters, "She's mine." Alexander's chest turned to stone. He didn't show Lily, but his mind burned. Mark was watching. The next day, he called a private investigator he trusted, James Holloway, a retired cop with a face lined by years of Chicago's dirtiest alleys. They met in a small diner near the Loop, the kind where nobody cared who you were if you tipped well. Alexander slid the photo across the booth. "He's circling us. I want to know everything. Where he goes, who he speaks to, what he's planning." Holloway studied the photo, then nodded. "Mark Thompson. I remember his file. Drugs, assault, time in Joliet. The kind who plays dirtier when cornered." He pocketed the photo. "Leave it to me." Weeks blurred into a rhythm of tension. Alexander adjusted his schedule, no longer leaving Lily alone even for a moment. He walked her to school, waited outside the classroom, kept her within sight. But fear still seeped into her world. At night, she drew pictures with darker colors, black crayon scrawls of alleys, stick figures with angry eyes, doors slamming shut. When Alexander asked, she pressed her lips tight. Only once did she whisper, "I don't like shadows anymore. They look like him." The words gutted him. Ruby, growing weaker, watched from her chair. "You can't shield her from everything, Alexander. But you can show her she's not alone in the fight." "I'm trying," he said, rubbing his temples. "Try harder," Ruby replied simply. Then Holloway returned with news. They met again in the diner. "I've tailed him for 2 weeks," Holloway said. "He's not just hanging around. He's tied up with a crew running fentanyl out of Cicero. Real bad crowd. If he drags Lily into a custody case, he'll try to dress up clean. But behind the curtain, he's still neck-deep in poison." Alexander's jaw clenched. "Can you prove it?" Holloway tapped his folder. "Working with contacts in DEA. Won't be easy, but if they move fast, we'll have enough to put him back inside." Alexander exhaled, part relief, part dread. "Do it, whatever it costs." That night, as he walked Lily home from school, he felt it, the sense of eyes on him. He turned down an alley shortcut. The shadows there seemed to move. A figure lingered at the far end, half hidden by dumpsters, watching, then gone. "Mr. A?" Lily asked, her hand tightening in his. He forced calm into his voice. "It's all right, Lily. Let's get home." But inside, his blood ran cold. Mark wasn't waiting for courts. He was stalking them. 2 nights later, Alexander returned from a late grocery run to find Lily sitting on the couch, pale, clutching her teddy. Ruby was asleep in her chair. "What's wrong?" Alexander asked, kneeling in front of her. She whispered, "There was knocking on the window. 3 times. Like he wanted me to know it was him." Alexander's stomach twisted. He rushed to the window, scanning the street. Nothing but darkness and the hum of the city. Still, he felt it. That chilling certainty that someone had been there. He sat back beside Lily, pulling her close. "Listen to me. No matter what he tries, you are safe here. This is your home. I'll protect you." She pressed her forehead against his chest. "Promise?" He wrapped his arms tighter. "Promise." Later that night, as Lily finally drifted into uneasy sleep, Alexander stood by the window, phone in hand. Holloway answered on the second ring. "He's pushing harder," Alexander said, voice low. "My apartment, my street. He's making her afraid to breathe." "I'll escalate with DEA," Holloway replied. "But you need to prepare for court, too. He's building his case, even if it's built on lies." Alexander stared out at the city, lights twinkling like Lily's paper stars. "Then I'll fight on every front. Streets, alleys, courts, whatever it takes. He won't win." Ruby's health continued to falter. Some nights she couldn't climb the stairs without gasping. She pulled Alexander aside one evening, her voice a rasp. "I don't have much time left," she admitted, "but I need to know you'll carry her through this storm, not just until the court rules. For the rest of her life." Alexander swallowed hard, meeting her gaze. "I will. She's my family now." Ruby's eyes softened. "Then you'll do." And yet, as Alexander tucked Lily in that night, he couldn't shake the sense of looming battle. The shadows outside the apartment stretched longer, darker. Somewhere in them, Mark was waiting, planning. Alexander brushed Lily's hair back, whispering as she slept. "Safe is real, Lily. Safe is here. And I'll prove it, no matter what it costs." But even as he said it, he knew the fight had only begun. The Cook County Courthouse loomed gray and austere on Clark Street, its stone pillars rising like immovable sentinels against the restless wind of Chicago. Inside, the air was thick with whispers, shuffling papers, and the smell of stale coffee. Courtrooms never smelled of justice, only of fear and anticipation. For Alexander Reed, this wasn't another high-stakes negotiation. This was war. Not for buildings, not for contracts, but for Lily. He sat at the defendant's table in a navy suit, tie knotted tight, his face unreadable to anyone except Lily, who sat 2 rows back, clutching Ruby's hand. Ruby, pale but unyielding, had insisted on coming despite her failing health. "She needs to see we're all here," she had said that morning. Across the aisle, Mark Thompson lounged in his chair, a cheap suit straining across his shoulders, hair slicked back as though polish could erase years of prison and alleyways. Beside him, a sharp-eyed lawyer stacked folders, every movement rehearsed to project confidence. Mark caught Alexander's gaze and smirked. It was the smirk of a man who believed blood was enough to erase absence. The judge entered, a gavel struck wood, and the room settled into silence. Mark's lawyer spoke first. His words dripped with feigned righteousness. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Mark Thompson, is the biological father of Lily Thompson. He acknowledges past mistakes, but has completed rehabilitation and re-entry programs. He is prepared to provide a stable, loving home for his daughter, as is his legal right. Meanwhile, Mr. Reed is not related to Lily. His sudden involvement, though well-meaning, is an overreach, an attempt to purchase fatherhood with wealth." Alexander's lawyer, a seasoned woman named Elaine Porter, rose next. Her tone was measured, precise. Your Honor, we do not deny Mr. Thompson's biology, but fatherhood is not ink on a birth certificate. It is presence. It is responsibility. Mr. Reed has provided Lily with stability, education, health care, and above all, love during the months her biological father remained absent. We will present evidence of Mr. Thompson's continued involvement in criminal activity, which directly endangers the child. A ripple of tension swept the courtroom. Mark's lawyer objected immediately. Unsubstantiated rumors. Elaine held up a folder. Not rumors, records, photos, testimonies, supplied by a licensed investigator in coordination with DEA task forces. Mr. Thompson's rehabilitation is nothing but a facade. The judge leaned forward. Proceed. But tread carefully, Ms. Porter. This is still a custody hearing, not a criminal trial. During recess, Alexander sat with Lily in the hallway. The marble floors echoed with hurried steps, the cold air making the child shiver. He crouched to her level, smoothing her blonde hair. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to, he told her. This isn't your burden. But Lily looked up with a resolve far older than her 7 years. Mr. A, if I don't tell them, they won't know. And I want them to know. Ruby, her voice faint, nodded. Let her speak, Alexander. Truth belongs even to the smallest voices. When the court reconvened, Elaine called her final witness. Lily Thompson. Gasps rippled through the benches. The judge's eyebrows rose. Are you certain, Ms. Porter? She's only 7. Yes, Your Honor, Elaine said gently. She asked to speak. Lily climbed into the witness chair, feet dangling far from the floor. She clutched her teddy bear-like armor. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Elaine approached slowly. Lily, can you tell us, in your own words, what matters most to you about where you live? Lily's eyes darted to Alexander. He gave her the smallest nod, his expression steady but filled with quiet encouragement. She turned back to the judge, her voice trembling but clear. When I was sick, he wasn't there. She pointed at Mark. When I was cold, he wasn't there. When I was scared, he wasn't there. But Mr. A... She looked at Alexander now, her eyes glistening. He's always there. He makes the doors stop slamming. He makes safe real. The silence after her words was heavy, profound. Even the court stenographer's hands paused for a beat before continuing. Mark shifted in his seat, jaw clenched. His lawyer tried to interject, but the judge raised a hand. Thank you, Lily, the judge said softly. You may step down. As Lily returned to Ruby's side, Alexander exhaled for the first time that day. He had faced hostile takeovers, cutthroat deals, political storms. None had ever shaken him the way that single sentence had. He makes safe real. The judge adjourned for the day, promising a ruling soon. But as Alexander led Lily out of the courthouse, flashes from reporters' cameras lit the steps. Questions rained down. Mr. Reed, are you trying to buy custody? Mark, how do you respond to allegations of drug ties? Lily, who do you want to live with? Alexander shielded the child, guiding her through the crowd. Ruby, leaning heavily on her cane, followed slowly. As the car door shut behind them, Lily leaned against Alexander's arm. Did I do good, Mr. A? He looked at her, heart tight. You did more than good. You were brave. Braver than anyone in that room. Ruby, settling into the back seat, whispered hoarsely, She gave the court what it needed. The truth that can't be bought or buried. Alexander nodded, staring out at Clark Street as the driver pulled away. The courthouse faded in the rearview mirror, but the fight wasn't over. He knew Mark wouldn't surrender easily. Men like him never did. But tonight, Alexander carried with him something stronger than any legal brief, stronger than any contract he had ever signed. The voice of a little girl who had made the whole room fall silent with 7 words that changed everything. He makes safe real. The ruling came on a gray Thursday morning. The sky over Chicago hung low and heavy, as though the city itself held its breath. Inside the Cook County Courthouse, the air was thick with tension as the judge read the decision. Based on presented evidence, and in the best interest of the child, guardianship of Lily Thompson is hereby granted to Mr. Alexander Reed. The gavel struck wood. The sound echoed through Alexander's chest like the release of years he hadn't realized he was holding. Mark shot to his feet, shouting, "This is a setup! You can't take my daughter from me!" Bailiffs restrained him as the judge calmly announced additional DEA charges pending against him. His lawyer shuffled papers furiously, already defeated. Lily clutched Alexander's sleeve, her voice a trembling whisper. "We won?" Alexander crouched to her level, his eyes steady and kind. "No, Lily, you won. Your voice made them see." She wrapped her arms around his neck, holding tight. "Then we can go home?" he smiled, his throat tight. "Yes, we can go home." That night, Alexander carried a box into the penthouse suite he had once considered nothing more than a stage for power. It had been stripped of its cold sterility, transformed by smaller hands. The living room now bore Lily's paper stars strung across the walls, fluttering faintly in the draft. Her crayon drawings, taped with care, lined the refrigerator. But the most important change waited upstairs. "Close your eyes," Alexander said, leading Lily by the hand. She obeyed, giggling softly. When she opened them again, she gasped. Her new bedroom shimmered in soft golden light. The ceiling had been fitted with a projection of constellations, thousands of tiny stars glowing against midnight blue. They twinkled and shifted as though the universe itself had bent down to nestle above her bed. "Your stars," Alexander said quietly. "You don't have to make them out of paper anymore. Now you'll have them every night." Lily's mouth fell open. She dropped her teddy to the floor and spun in a circle, eyes wide. "It's like sleeping under the sky." Then suddenly, she stopped and turned back to him, her voice breaking. "Now I have a home." She threw her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek against him. "And now I have a dad." Alexander closed his eyes, arms trembling as he hugged her back. He had never wanted a title so badly, and never had one felt so unearned, until this moment, when it was given freely by the child who mattered most. Ruby sat in a chair by the window, watching the exchange with weary eyes. Her breath was shallow, her cough sharper than ever, but her smile was soft. "You kept your word," she whispered when Alexander joined her later. "You stayed." "I'll always stay," he said, his voice steady. Ruby's hand, fragile as parchment, closed over his. "Good. Then I can rest." Her words lingered in the air, both a blessing and a farewell. Alexander's throat tightened, but he squeezed her hand gently. "We still need you, Ruby." She shook her head. "No, child. She needs you. And you're finally ready to be needed." In the weeks that followed, the house filled with the rhythms of a real home. Mornings meant rushing to pack lunches and walking to school. Evenings meant homework at the kitchen table, laughter over burnt dinners, and Ruby telling stories in her raspy voice while Lily listened wide-eyed. The paper stars stayed, even with the glowing ceiling. Lily insisted they were part of her history, part of the journey that led her here. And Alexander never argued. One evening, as summer air drifted warm through the open balcony doors, Lily dragged a blanket onto the terrace. "Come see the real stars," she told Alexander. They lay side by side. The city stretched below, the sky stretched above. Lily traced patterns with her finger. "That one looks like our house, and that one looks like Teddy, and that one—" She pointed to the brightest star. "That's Mom. She's watching." Alexander felt a lump rise in his throat. "Do you think she'd be proud of you?" Lily turned to him with certainty. "I know she is, because I'm not alone anymore." The words pierced him, tender and fierce. He reached over, holding her hand as the stars glittered silently. Later that night, Alexander stood at her doorway, watching as she drifted to sleep beneath her galaxy. Ruby's letter sat folded on the desk beside him, left for him a week earlier when she sensed her time was near. Family isn't where you're born, it's where you're chosen. And you, Alexander, have been chosen. Don't ever forget the gift you've been given. He pressed the paper to his chest, the words searing into him. For decades, Alexander Reed had believed his legacy would be towers of steel and glass, his name carved into skylines. But here, in this quiet room lit by constellations, he realized his true legacy was something softer, something enduring. Not towers, not contracts. A little girl's whisper, "Now I have a dad." And for the first time in his life, Alexander felt truly at home, beneath the stars. Autumn rolled gently into Chicago, leaves turning amber and gold along the pathways of Lincoln Park. The air carried the crisp promise of change. For Alexander, every morning began not with stock reports or investor calls, but with the sound of Lily's footsteps running through the apartment, her laughter chasing away the ghosts that once haunted its glass walls. But Ruby grew weaker. Her cough deepened, and soon she no longer had the strength to leave her bed. Alexander brought doctors, nurses, everything money could buy, yet Ruby only shook her head. "Don't waste fortunes trying to stop the tide," she whispered. "Just sit with me. Tell me she's safe." And so he did. Every night, Alexander sat by her bedside, recounting Lily's new drawings, her spelling tests, the way she had begun calling him Dad without hesitation. Ruby listened, her lined face softening with peace. One evening, as Lily slept down the hall, Ruby reached for Alexander's hand. Her voice was faint but steady. "Do you remember what I told you? Family isn't where you're born. It's where you're chosen." Alexander's throat tightened. "I remember. She's chosen you, and so have I." The next morning, Ruby slipped away quietly, her hand still folded around his. The funeral was held in a small chapel on the south side. Only a handful of neighbors came, people Ruby had helped over the years with meals, advice, or simply a listening ear. Lily wore a black dress, holding Alexander's hand as tightly as she once clutched her Teddy. When the service ended, Lily placed a folded paper star on Ruby's casket. "So you'll never be in the dark," she whispered. Alexander lifted her into his arms. "She isn't in the dark, Lily. She's in every star you hang, every laugh you give. She'll always be here." As they stepped outside into the golden autumn light, Alexander felt Ruby's words echo in him. He had been chosen. Now it was his turn to choose, fully and without fear. Months later, life in the penthouse had settled into a rhythm, but something was missing. Not Ruby, for she lived on in their hearts, but the sense of permanence. Alexander wanted Lily to know, without question, that she would never face another slammed door again. So one winter afternoon, he surprised her with a trip to the Cook County Courthouse, not for battle this time, but for resolution. In the judge's chamber, with Lily perched on a chair, swinging her legs, Alexander signed the last of the adoption papers. "It's official," the judge said, smiling warmly. "Mr. Reed, you are now legally Lily's father." Lily's eyes lit up. She jumped into his arms, whispering in his ear, "Now it's real. Forever." He hugged her close, his own eyes damp. Forever. But fate had one more gift to give. Through Ruby's estate, a modest envelope discovered in her drawer, Alexander found a letter. It was addressed to him, written in Ruby's careful, wavering script. "Alexander, if you are reading this, then I am gone. Thank you for proving me wrong, that not every man with wealth forgets the poor. You gave Lily what I could not, a future. But there is more. My niece Claire lives outside the city. She has a good heart, but hardship has kept her distant. I always dreamed she might be part of Lily's life. Maybe she can be part of yours too. Don't close the door to love. Family isn't only the children we raise, but the partners who help us raise them." Alexander folded the letter carefully. It felt less like an instruction and more like a blessing. In time, Claire did come. She was younger than Ruby, with her aunt's sharp eyes but a gentleness all her own. At first, she visited only to help with Ruby's few remaining affairs. But she lingered, drawn into the laughter of a little girl who treated her like family from the start. One evening, as snow drifted over the city again, Alexander found himself standing with Claire in the Lincoln Park Conservatory. The glass dome glistened with holiday lights, the air warm with orchids and palms. Lily darted between benches, scattering flower petals she had gathered. Alexander turned to Claire, his voice quiet but steady. "Ruby wanted you to be part of Lily's life. She didn't know you'd become part of mine, too." Claire's smile was soft, her hand slipping into his. The wedding was small, just as Ruby would have wanted. Neighbors gathered, Lily walked the aisle scattering flowers with radiant joy, and Alexander stood waiting beneath a canopy of white blossoms. When vows were spoken, it wasn't grandeur or wealth that filled the room. It was the quiet certainty of people who had been broken and found one another whole. Afterward, in the conservatory's garden, Lily tugged Alexander's sleeve. "Now it's really true, isn't it? Everybody has a home." Alexander knelt, pulling her and Claire close. "Yes, Lily, everybody has a home." That evening, the three of them sat on a park bench outside, watching the city lights flicker across the horizon. Above them, the stars shone bright and patient. Lily leaned against Alexander's shoulder. Claire's hand rested in his, and for the first time, he felt no emptiness in the spaces money could never fill. This was family. Not by blood, not by wealth, but by choice. And under the stars of Chicago, Alexander Reed finally understood. The greatest legacy he would leave was not towers of glass, but the simple, stubborn miracle of love chosen, again and again, every day. Thank you, dear friends, for staying with us until the very last page of this journey. If this story touched your heart, we'd be so grateful if you subscribed, so we can keep sharing more healing stories of love, hope, and second chances. From our hearts to yours, may you always find a place you can truly call home.